So far we've been talking about grasslands that have historically been important to people and animals and all kinds of things here. Let's talk a little bit about how these grasslands are so important to wildlife. So starting with birds here, I'd like to introduce you to Aaron Youngberg with the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies. Aaron, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, good to be here.
Good to have you here. Let's start out with why the grasslands are so important to the birds.
Well, there's three really important things about birds and grasslands. The birds are actually essential for the grassland ecosystem to function. They help disperse seeds, they fertilize the soil with their droppings, they help to control insects and rodents, and they also serve as food items for other animals. And grasslands also provide a stopover habitat for birds migrating through, including shorebirds and other waterfowl that might actually stop and nest in the prairie wetlands.
And these birds have a long way to fly too.
They do,
Yeah.
thousands of miles, some of them are coming. So they really need these places to stop and rest and they refuel. And thirdly, and possibly the most important, there are 29 species of birds that can only breed in the grasslands.
Ah.
And such a small group can easily be overlooked, especially compared to some of our more colorful or vocal species that we see in the forests. And as a result, the population declines of grassland birds has gone largely unnoticed until recently. And now grassland birds are actually a conservation priority because a lot of the species have lost up to 70% of their population.
70%?
Yeah,
That's huge.
since the 1960s.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's really important that we work together to conserve healthy grasslands because these birds can't adapt to any other habitat.
So what is the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies doing to help these grassland birds right now?
Well, Bird Conservancy works to conserve habitat by working with landowners, ranchers, farmers, and public entities like the Forest Service. We also do a lot of public outreach with our citizen science projects like the students are doing today. And we work with children both inside and outside the classroom. We also do a lot of research to learn about birds and what they need.
Let's talk about the research. What are you guys researching?
Well, we do a lot of research. Birds migrate, so we do a lot of research both where they breed in the summer and where they spend the winter time. And more than any other animal, birds tell us the connectivity of the grasslands because birds use grasslands both in Mexico, in the US, and in Canada. They don't recognize our national borders.
So they're not flying around with maps, seeing where they're supposed to go or their GPS, right?
No, it's really amazing. And as you can see on the map, it shows where the grasslands once stretched from Canada across the Great Plains and down into Mexico and from the Rocky Mountains as far east as Ohio.
Wow.
But with a lot of habitat loss, we've also had a great loss in the number of birds, like I mentioned earlier. So we're working with the Audubon Society, the U.S. Forest Service, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, partners in the U.S. and Mexico, to do an integrated demographic study on two particular species that have shown steep declines, the Baird's sparrow and the grasshopper sparrow. And an integrated demographic study just means that we're doing research both where they spend the summer and where they spend the winter.
All right. Let's take a look at just how this research is being done in the summer in Montana and in North Dakota.
So I'm here in the Chihuahuan Desert of northern Mexico. These are the wintering grounds where virtually all the grassland birds from the Great Plains come to spend the winter months. And in fact, it's a little longer than the winter. They're here for about 8 months out of the year, starting in August, September, and all the way through April. So these grasslands that you see around me is where these birds come and live for the rest of the time when they're not in the Great Plains. A lot happens here that affects their survival. The birds have to avoid being eaten by predators. They have to be able to find enough food. And the grass that you see around me, these are the grass seeds that provide the food for them to survive the winter. And the number of birds that survive the winter down here affects the population size of the birds in Colorado and places on the breeding grounds. So this is a critically important habitat for the migratory birds of the Great Plains.
So that's what is going on, and that's what they're doing to understand the life cycle of the birds in the summer. But let's talk about our other big season, the winter.
Yeah, so scientists have spent a lot of time in research on the areas where they breed in the US and Canada, but the populations still continue to decline, and no large effort has ever been made to study the birds where they winter on their non-breeding grounds, which is the Chihuahuan Desert in northern Mexico. So we're in the middle of a multi-year study in a conservation area in northern Mexico in Janos, Chihuahua.
Janos. So what have you discovered with the birds in Mexico?
Well, unlike on their breeding grounds, the winter populations are much more mobile, which leaves them really vulnerable to predators and to weather events. We also learned that the rain in the previous summer is really important for the grass seed production that the birds need to survive for food and cover through the winter. And really important also is the management of the grasslands down there to keep invasive plants and shrubs to a minimum and to not overgraze so the birds can have healthy grass to survive through the
So we
winter.
talked a little bit about birds migrating, but these little birds can travel over 2,000 miles migrating from Mexico to Colorado and beyond, all the way to North Dakota, Montana, and even to Canada, right?
That's right.
They got to be strong, right?
Yes, they do.
Oh, for sure. That's amazing. Considering this long journey, we need to do our part in helping them on that journey. Erin, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
this
you.
morning. It's good to have you here.